Hello and welcome. This is Jennifer McGuire. Today I'm going to share with you a technique that I used to do years ago when I would travel teaching. It's a very easy way to create inked backgrounds and you don't need many tools for it. I did that on all of these cards here, and the stamps that I used are new from Tim Holtz. They were exclusively designed for Simon Says Stamp as part of their Stamptember celebration. So this is an exclusive set and I think it's a fantastic one. I'm using watercolor paper today. I would recommend this technique with watercolor paper, but you can try whatever paper you have. Now here's a look at the stamp set that I'm using. Now this is, again, exclusive for Simon Says Stamp by Tim Holtz, and I really like the hand drawing lettering on these. I think they're beautiful and they're perfect for the technique that we're talking about today. Okay, so I'm inking up my stamp with some embossing ink. This is a clear sticky ink, and I'm just going to stamp onto the textured side of the watercolor paper. You could use either the flat or textured side. It's totally up to you. I decided to go for the textured look today. And now I am adding some white embossing powder to that. I'll go ahead and heat set that to emboss it also. Here I have another image from that same stamp set. I'm being careful to use the anti-static powder tool before I emboss to make sure I get a nice clean image. Because this is a cling stamp, it's going to stamp beautifully onto the textured watercolor paper. Once again, I added white embossing powder and heat set that. Now on the top of the tree, I decided to add the rays. There's this rays stamp image included in the set. And if you stamp it 3 times around the star at the top, it looks like the star is shining. I found it easiest to heat emboss in between each stage so I could see where to stamp it. And for my final card, I heat embossed the Merry Christmas sentiment along with 2 little holly clusters that are included in the stamp set. So now I have a bunch of watercolor paper with heat embossed sentiments. Okay, so now it's time for the fun part, for the inked background. So here's a closer look. We have white on white right now. Any ink that we put down on top of this, that embossing will resist. So I've picked 3 shades of distress ink that I'm going to use today, and I am preparing a perfect pearl water mix. So I have a full mister bottle, a water mist bottle, and some white perfect pearls. This is a great pigment powder that mixes wonderfully with water to create shine on your project. I'm putting 2 scoops of this into the jar, and then I can save this for the future. I've done this many times, and I usually use the mister bottle from Tim Holtz, but I have yet to find that in all my packed boxes. So I'm just going to create a new one today. I'm misting it a few times so that you can see that the perfect pearl water is coming out. You get a pearlized water this way. You could use regular water if you want to skip the shine. So I'm taking 3 colors of blue distress ink. I have Mermaid Lagoon, Blueprint Sketch, and this one's Chipped Sapphire. You could use absolutely any distress ink colors you want. Now I'm working on a craft sheet. That's the best way to use distress ink. And then I'm spritzing it with that pearlized water that I created. Now here is the really expensive and fancy tool you need for this technique. You need your fingers. Everybody's got them. It's fun to get inky. I know some people have trouble with it. You can wear gloves if you want to, but I found that this works great and the ink eventually wears off. Okay, so I'm just taking 3 fingers, dabbing it into the wet color, and then dabbing it around on my project. I'm kind of mixing the colors up, but by doing it with your fingers, you end up with little dots of color, so it gets this really cool looking kind of faux granite look in the background. Now at first it'll be light, but I'm going to continue to do this a lot. When I think I'm done, I'm going to add even more. The more color you put down, the more intense the result will be. Now every once in a while I like to clean off my craft sheet and start again. One thing that you can do is wipe another embossed panel into it to pick up that color and keep adding more and more color to that, and that creates another card. But I'm focusing on this technique today. So now I'm putting more of the same colors down. I'm spraying a little less water this time, and then I'm going to keep doing the same process. Now the more water you put, the more watercolored it'll look. The less water you put, the more splotchy or kind of dotty it would look. You can go ahead and heat set it every once in a while to kind of cause it to dry and then add more color on top. So here you can see I'm using very little water with the ink so that my color is more intense. Now I did add some pumice stone. Now pumice stone is like a gray color. Doesn't seem that great of an addition here, but when you use it with the perfect pearl water, it turns to like a pewter. So I'm adding like some pewter dots here and there to my background. You'll see some of the white kind of showing through in that background or the lighter color. I think it's best to go and keep adding color. The more you put on, the better your white image that is resisting will pop out. At this point, I decided to do some flicks of water over this. This is that same pearlized water. You can even add color to this if you want to. It just adds to all the texture that's going on here in the background. Now, the nice thing about using your fingers to do this inking is that you can really have control over creating a background. You can control where the color goes, and if you're like me and you have control issues when it comes to inking, this is a good mix. You have the fun of using your fingers to paint, but you're also kind of controlling where the color goes. So I encourage you to explore this and see what you can do. Again, you could wear gloves or use a different inking tool if you want to, but I'm telling you, this is a lot of fun. Okay, so that's the first example there. The next one I did a little bit later on in the day. I decided to do one with the rays coming out from the top of the tree. Now on this one, I kind of controlled where my ink went. I kept picked raspberry towards the top, seedless preserves more towards the middle, and wilted violet towards the bottom. So it kind of looks like the top of the card is lighter. So you can control, again, where that color goes and get like a nice ombre look like this. You can also do different parts of an image, one color or another. Doesn't matter. It's nice because by using your fingers, you can control the amount of color you put down and where you put it. One of the nice things about distress inks is that you can mix a variety of colors and get a beautiful look. So let me do one more example here. I'm just going to show you a little bit of this one. This, I like the color combination here. We have mowed lawn, we have evergreen bough, and some twisted citron. So these are three very different shades of green. One is real bright, one is like a Kelly green, and one is like a bluish green. So I'm just going to go ahead and mix these colors down. At first, you'll probably look at it and be very uncertain that you're making any progress, but just stick with it. It doesn't take long. The more ink you put down, the better the results. I ended up coming in with some peeled paint green also that was a little bit darker, just to add more of an olive look to this. And again, you can keep coming in and adding more and more colors, or you can just use a few and mix those up. Okay, so here I've put a lot of color on this. I decided to go in with that darker peeled paint and do it more around the edges, so I had darker color around the edges. I did later end up trimming this down, so it kind of was wasted time here, but I did want to show you that you can add the darker color to the edges. I also like to go in and add darker colors to little areas over the embossing, so it kind of soaks in between your embossing and makes it stand out more. I actually have one more here. Sorry about that. This one is reds. I wanted to show you that you really can do any colors. Here I used abandoned coral and festive berries and some candied apple. These colors don't vary that much, but I am able to use them. After I put this color down, I did go in with a little bit of gathered twigs, and that, when mixed with that perfect pearlized water, kind of gives a gold look. Now you could mix colored perfect pearls in with your water if you wanted to, but I really like that good old white perfect pearl. I think it works great for this technique and many others. Okay, so now it's time to finish off these cards. I wanted to show you a great way to give a finished look to an ink background like this one. You can see that beautiful shine there and the variation in colors of all these, but it really gives nice definition if you add some inking to the edges. So I'm going in with one of the colors that I used for my inked background, and I'm using an ink blending tool just to add some color to the edges. When doing this, I always start off of the paper and kind of swirl my way on, and this gives you really nice blending. By adding that darker color around the edge, it just gives nice definition that really makes a big difference when you put it up against a background, especially on a white note card. Now, to make sure that white embossing pops out nice against the colored background, I do sometimes come in with a baby wipe or a slightly wet cloth to just dab away any color that might be resting on that white heat embossed image. Not much should be there, but that sometimes helps to make it pop. I am loving how this beautiful tree image kind of pops out against that bold background. Okay, so now it's time to pull these together into cards. If you look closely, I have a faux stitched edge around the outside of the card. Wanted to show you how I did that. I'm using a faux stitched die from My Favorite Things. It's a set of faux stitched border dies. I'm just using one that creates like 2 faux stitched lines. And I am putting this onto the edge of a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch top folding white note card. You'll see I'm going right up to the creased edge, using a little piece of tape to hold it in place. As I run it through my die cut machine, you do this as you would any other die. The difference between these faux stitched dies and regular dies is that these don't actually cut. So it's not cutting an edge. Instead, it's kind of piercing all those little dashes. I originally was going to use an embossing folder on my white background, but not enough of the white background showed. So this was just enough to add some interest to that edge, but I didn't end up covering too much of the technique up. I did this faux stitching line on all 4 edges of the front of the card. Now to finish the cards off, very simple, I added a simple white mat to the stamped piece, and I added a piece of craft foam behind it so that it would have some dimension on the card, kind of pop up a little bit. And that's it. Now for the green card, I did trim it down to be a square card. Now there is one more thing I wanted to mention. You can do this technique with other dye inks, but I really find that distress inks work the best because they react so well with water. So if you are interested in this Tim Holtz stamp set or any of the products I talk about, I link them in my YouTube description below. But I encourage you to go over to my blog, jennifermcguireinc.com. I have more photos and more tips to share. Now, distress inks are so much fun. I have 3 other videos that show completely different techniques using distress ink, and those are all there in the middle if you want to check those out. Thanks for watching. I hope you'll return again soon and have a great day.